garden enthusiasts. Welcome back to another segment with Master Gardener Mamta. Today I want to talk to you a little bit about composting. In the spring, I always like to kind of revisit this topic. I know some of you have probably been to my composting classes in the past, and a lot of this information will be kind of a repeat, a little review for you, but there'll be some new information as well. I'm going to talk a little bit about why do you want to compost, the different type of compost systems or compost bins that you can use, and then of course what you want to compost, and then the process and how long that it might take. So let's get started. Okay, here we are, Composting 101. Let's get started. How we're going to get started, how we're going to maintain, and then some frequently asked questions. First of all, you might ask, well, why should I compost? Why should I go to the extra trouble of separating my greens in the kitchen, or saving my leaves from my trees, or the things that I have around my house that I could add to my compost bin? Why should I even do that? Well, first, adding organic materials to the soil improves your moisture retention. So if you can make your own compost, you can add that organic material from what would normally just go to a landfill and just would become garbage that's not going to be used by anybody. So you're going to be using what would normally which normally just be your garbage, and use that to add organic material to your garden, to your plants, to your beds, those types of things. Adding decomposed organic material to the soil feeds the beneficial organisms that are there. The compost provides a balanced, slow-release source of nutrients that helps the soil hold nutrients long enough for the plants to use them. Of course, composting saves money. You avoid not only the cost of buying your soil conditioners and the bag manure, but also you don't have to drive to the store or use gas or take your time and your energy to go get those things. You have them readily available right there in your own backyard. And of course, it improves the water holding capacity, which results in reduced dependency on watering. So compost is very good for your plants, your beds, the things that you're growing in your garden, and it will help in many ways. What do we need to do for the composting to work? Well, nitrogen, water, oxygen, and soil must be present for the plant material in a compost pile to decompose. We need those things to help the process to break things down. So the microorganisms in the soil decompose the plant material, which is mostly carbon, and this is done by oxidation. Because the microbes use the carbon, 2/3 of it's converted into carbon dioxide, which is then released into the atmosphere. And then the 1/3 passes into the microbe cells, and then that stays within the pile. One of the questions that people always ask me is, how long is it going to take for my compost? And there are lots of things that you hear, especially when you are when you're looking at different compost bins. You'll hear, you'll see things, or you'll hear things that, make compost in 3 weeks. You can make it, throw your things in there and then give it a whirl or mix up your pile, and in 3 weeks you'll have compost. Well, yes, you could have compost in 3 weeks, but you would need all of the ideal conditions for this to happen. So you would need the right temperature, you would need the ideal constant temperature, you would need the exact combination of carbon to nitrogen, you would need to be turning it at during regular intervals so that everything is being mixed evenly. So these studies have been done, and at universities and people who do this to study composting. And yes, it can take 3 weeks. It's very unlikely that in your own home that you're going to have all these ideal conditions that you would actually have compost in 3 weeks. So you need to kind of keep that in mind. I would say realistically, if you have you're layering it, you're having the correct temperature throughout the season, you're turning it so that things are being evenly mixed and it's not getting overheated, or it's not, but it's getting hot enough that you could realistically have compost in a couple months. So if you started your pile early in the spring, probably later in the spring or early summer, you might have some compost to use. Do it throughout the summer, then later in the summer, early fall, you'll have some compost to use. That's probably more realistic, but again, there's so many different factors that determine how long it will take. So let's look at some of those. For most efficient composting, use a pile that is between 3 feet cubed and 5 feet cubed. That's why you see a lot of these bins will be that size, because that is what the recommended size is for a pile. You want to have a carbon to nitrogen ratio that's 30 to 1. You want to layer material green and brown 1 to 1. The ideal temperature in the middle of the pile should be around 160 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, I don't know too many people who are going out constantly measuring the temperature of the middle of their pile to make sure that's 160 degrees. So again, this is one of the reasons that you're probably not going to have compost in 3 weeks, because you're not going to be maintaining a temperature of 160 degrees constantly. But the point of that is you want to make sure that you're turning your compost pile so that things are being mixed up and the temperature is not getting too hot and killing the good microbes off. And the pile should be turned regularly with consistent moisture. You don't want it to be sopping wet so that it's dripping and soupy, or you don't want it to dry out and then things aren't breaking down like they're supposed to. All right, what type of compost bins are the best, or what might be the best for you? So there's a variety of things that are available on the market, and let's take a look at one that I have and how or why I use that. Okay, so here we are in my garden, and I just want to tell you a little bit about this type of compost bin. So I just keep this in the corner of my garden, and I just throw scraps from my garden and whatever things that I've cleaned out of it here in the spring into this bin. Of course, the problem with this is it's hard to turn, and that's one of the things you want to make sure that you're doing when you're composting. This is just handy though for me to toss things in as I'm cleaning the garden out, and then I'll just literally pick up this whole thing and move it over, turn my pile, and then use that as it starts to break down and start a new pile. So that's what this might be something that's good for. If you have not a lot of space, you're not maybe composting a lot of things, and then you can easily get in there with some kind of, little rake or something and be able to turn your compost. So you see that different bins work for different purposes. If you have the space, then you might want to try something different like this. Okay, so now if you have this space and you have the energy, I guess, and you feel like you're going to be making a lot of compost, perhaps you want to do a system like this, where you have the 3 compartments. The middle compartment is where I just throw all the browns, and of course we talked about that. And then we have the one pile that is almost ready, and then our active pile. So this is a system that works really well, but again, you have to have the space, and you probably want to make sure that you have enough things that you're composting to be able to sustain something like this. You don't have to have anything fancy. You don't have to build anything or buy anything. You can just make a pile in the corner of your yard, which sometimes that's the best way to go, because then it's easy to turn, it's easy to be able to add new material and bury it, it's easy to kind of sort out things, that the bigger chunks, and move them to the side. So sometimes the best way to go is just to have a big pile somewhere that you can just throw your kitchen scraps, throw your leftover garden material, and go with that. So what are the things that you want to add to your compost? Well, we mentioned that you want to have greens and browns. So the greens are the nitrogen, and these will include things like fruits and vegetable peels, citrus rinds, melon rinds, coffee grounds, tea leaves, old vegetables from the crisper, houseplant trimmings, weeds that haven't gone to seed. Now, the thing about that, and people have different ideas about this. So if you have weeds, or if you have things that have gone to seed, could you add them to your compost pile? Well, yes, you could, and especially if the compost pile is getting hot enough, you might be able to kill off those things that you wouldn't want necessarily growing in your compost bin, or then eventually growing in your garden once you go to use it. So if you have weeds and you're concerned about, I don't know if those seeds are going to get killed off, then don't bother adding them to your compost bin. Grass clippings are a great one, fresh leaves, deadheads from flowers. Again, plants, as long as they're not diseased. Again, if you have it heating up enough, you'll probably be okay, but you don't want to be spreading diseases to your healthy plants. Seaweed, cooked plain rice, cooked plain pasta. There's things that sometimes people, the kitchen foods like breads and that kind of stuff, some people add that and bury it into their bins and let it break down, and others, they don't want to add those types of things. One of the reasons that the things that you might not want to add is because you don't want to encourage pests or animals coming to your bin. Broccoli stalks or any other kind of stalks that you have, sod, thinnings from your vegetable garden, all those types of things can be used as far as greens are concerned. You can also add eggshells to your compost bin. Now, this is another one of those things that people have varying ideas about. I always suggest using eggshells if they're like from hard-boiled eggs because the eggs have been cooked. I don't like to put raw eggshells that still have like raw egg material in the shells because, again, I don't want to encourage animals to be digging through my compost bin. If you have a lot of eggshells and you don't want to throw them away, you want to add them to your compost bin, you can put them in boiling hot water, stick them into your oven, and let them kind of bake up a little bit, and then you can throw them into your compost bin. Other people do put raw eggshells into their compost bin and make sure they just bury it really well so that then the critters aren't digging through it. But that's something that you can kind of decide for yourself what might work best for you. So let's talk about the browns. So when we're talking about browns, what does that mean? Well, that is the carbon. So the greens were the nitrogen, and they add nitrogen to your compost bin, and the browns will add carbon to your compost pile. So those would include shredded newspaper, shredded office paper, school papers, shredded non-glossy junk mail. You don't want to have like those plastic sleeves or plastic windows, and adding that to your compost bin, obviously. And you want to make sure it's shredded. You don't want to just take a pile or stack of newspapers or papers and throw them out in your compost pile because those are just going to compress and they're not going to break down very easily. So these would need to be shredded. Torn up plain cardboard boxes, not with any kind of glossy coatings or tape or any that kind of thing. And again, these need to be torn up. You can't just take a whole big box and throw it out there and expect it to break down quickly. Straw, bedding from different animals, fall leaves, chopped up twigs and small branches, all of these types of things that are listed here. Use napkins that aren't greasy or oily. Toilet paper rolls, you can break those down and throw those in there. Bird's nests, pine needles, paper coffee filters, paper egg cartons that you are torn up into pieces, sawdust from untreated wood, brown paper shopping bags, again torn up, leftover, the packaging from your seed starting kits, all those types of things, the liners from hanging basket, wood chips, those types of things can all be added for the browns. And again, you want to layer this. You want to kind of make like a compost lasagna. You want to have greens and browns. And that's why when I showed you having the different bins or having the different systems of compost systems allows you then, when you throw some kitchen scraps in, then if you have a pile of leaves to the side, then you can throw that in and then throw some more greens in and then add some more browns. So you can kind of layer it and you can keep your browns separately until you need to use them in your compost pile. Some of you might be interested in worm composting, so just a little information about that. Worm composting is using worms to recycle food scraps and other organic material into a valuable soil amendment. This is called Burma Compost, and this is stuff that you can do just right in your own home. You don't even need to have it out in your yard. You can just do it in like a big kind of one of those big plastic bins. Some things to remember: that worms need moisture, air, food, darkness, and warm but not hot temperatures. Bedding made of newspaper strips or leaves will hold the moisture and contain the airspace is essential to the worm. So there's a lot of good information if you're interested in doing Burma composting. And I'll share some of those links with you after the video or after the PowerPoint so that you can take a look at that. Here's some information about the worm bin layers and a good resource there that you can use if you are interested in doing some Burma composting. And make sure that you check out Miss Kelly's video. A lot of you know Miss Kelly from the library, and she also likes to compost, and she's got a great video, and you can see how she does it. All right, well, thank you for joining me today and reviewing our presentation on composting. I hope that it helped you, if you haven't started composting before, to help you get started and give you some ideas. And if you do compost, to kind of give you a quick review on, oh yeah, I forgot, you can add this or you can add that. So perhaps you can start, as you're going through the spring and summer season, those things that you come across, throw them in your compost bin and make sure that you're mixing it on a regular basis. Make sure that you have a good mixture of the browns and the greens and good moisture. And then you can add that to all your beds and your vegetable garden and flowers, and that'll be a great nutrient-rich amendment to your soil. And you don't have to worry about over-fertilizing or do I have the right combination. This is really just a great natural thing that you can use for all your plants. Okay, happy gardening until next time, and we'll see you then.